Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think I admitted the last people in the wait room. So I'm new to this computer because I didn't want to disturb other people in other rooms. So I look really fuzzy to myself, but I can see you all. Now, before I start, though, I'd like a show of hands of anybody who's been to China, who's familiar with China. Oh, good. At least one, Eric. Okay, and Carrie and Bob and Liz. Okay, nice to see you all. Good. I see a thumb up there. And Simone. Yes. Okay, so I just want to introduce myself a little bit. This is going to be an hour, probably, depending on question and answer. I'll try to stick within the hour. If not, does it matter? Like, is everybody waiting for dinner or somebody waiting for dinner or something? Okay, I see. Yeah, okay. So
you can stay on as long as you want, Mary. We have time, and we have, if people leave, they can always see the rest of the video on the YouTube channel.
Okay. When I see people dropping off, then I know. All right. My name is Mary Ann Lee. Yan is my maiden name, and I married my husband, Alex Lee. So I combined the two. And I was born in Hong Kong, came here when I was 20, came here for university, and has been living and traveling around, back to China and to all over the world because I like traveling. Been with Mensa for maybe, I can't count, a lot of years, but mainly I'm the quiet one. I stay within myself and read the bulletin and stuff. I don't think I've helped out with the urge yet, but I will eventually. So anyway, let's start. Oh, there's Rich. Richard is waiting to, okay, he came in. Okay, we have more people coming in. So anyway, I didn't see a lot of hands, but how familiar, for those people who raised their hands, how familiar are you with Chinese culture? Okay. The reason I want to stick with Chinese culture, of course, is I hate politics. I hate, I want to stay away from all that. But wanted to share because a lot of people, when I first came to San Diego, I had to repeat, of course, I was born a British citizen in Hong Kong. So I had a British accent. And of course, I have a Chinese look. And when I ask for directions, I have to say, repeat at least 2 times to get people to understand what I wanted. So of course, then I adopted the California accent very soon, and and clarified to people that, yeah, Hong Kong is Chinese, not Japanese, etc., etc. So I really, really want to share the Chinese culture with people who are not so familiar, or maybe slightly familiar with the culture. And let me just start, and I won't say so much. I'll share screen. And okay, today's date. Now, I know there's a black box by my name, but that I cannot get rid of it because that's a Zoom thing for me. Anyway, I hope the presentation will go well. Good. Okay, just a glimpse of the map of China. And you guys can see this is, oops, I can't see my mouse. Hold on. Can you all see this pretty well, this map? Okay, I guess I can't get response because everybody's
we can see it.
All right, good. The colored part is what's China proper these days. Mongolia used to be part of China, and this whole shape is like a mulberry leaf, according to what we describe our country, the shape of the country. So roughly, the shape is, the size is pretty much the same as U.S. We have 48 states continentally, and China has multiple provinces. So since Mongolia, this part has become an autonomy, and so the colored part is really what China is all of is encompassed. And you can see with the, I know I'm not talking about politics, but I want to tell you the position of Xinjiang and Tibet. These are the two westernmost provinces and huge, as you can see from the size, compared to all these smaller provinces on the east coast of China. And, you can tell how sensitive it is if these two provinces or these two minority tribes become independent or have any kind of trouble. So here is the capital, Beijing, and these are the northeastern provinces where Japan, when they invaded China, made into a Manchuria country, kind of fake country, and this is Hong Kong, my little spot, my homeland. It is really small, but it's kind of important in economically and financially, before China opened up its gates or raised the bamboo curtain, like people are saying. So Qinghai is another province that's pretty close to Xinjiang and Tibet, but you can see from this coming up, this map, later on, this one, it is mostly, this is the Tibetan plateau, and Xinjiang has a large desert and huge mountain ranges, the Altanshan mountain ranges. This is also Qinghai. So basically, sorry. This is the part where I can't control the slideshow. I wanted to go back to here. So these are not very inhabited or populated or very densely populated because of the geological features we just saw in the third map there. So these provinces along the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea, because of the prominence or proximity to outside world and Japan and Korea, and basically for ship transportation, these are mostly densely populated, very, very much along the seaboard. And this is the Yangtze River. I think some of you might have cruised up and down that river. And the Yellow River is up here with a very prominent, we call it a hood, this part of Yellow River. That is basically where the Chinese culture started, along the river here. And then people then move along the river and the tributaries down further to the south. So this is around Beijing is where the Peking man was discovered, whom we thought was the oldest, bone discovered until Lucy in Africa was discovered. Anyway, let's stay on this map then. With all the countries near it, Mongolia still has a lot of economic connection with China, just because of history. They actually, they have been under subjugation to the dynasties, to the emperors. So, but they also, because they're autonomous now, they're also pretty close to Russia up there. And then we have Pakistan, Nepal, these little countries, very Himalayan countries, close to that border. And of course, we have the skirmishes too with India along these borders. So I mean China, not we as U.S. So when I say it in the first person, you please understand me as being a Chinese saying that. And then Hong Kong being, my homeland, it was leased during the last stretches of Jin Dynasty to the Brits, and Macau was leased to the Portuguese. So Hong Kong had a 100-year lease, which at in the year 1997, it was returned to China. Margaret Thatcher was the prime minister then, and she tried to talk them into extending the lease, and to China that would be a big slap to the face. So no, they didn't. It was a very shameful Treaty of Nanking that let Hong Kong become British colony. So since 1997, a lot of people have been trying to emigrate out of Hong Kong, even though they were promised 50 years of status quo. And we can see more and more now that Hong Kong has become very mainland Chinese, you know, for good or worse, depending on your stand in politics. So let's move on. Here is a map of the dynasties. I know you guys can probably look on or Google or any wiki pages and get this, but I want to talk about it because you can see all the dynasties last a little bit of time. Okay, BCE stands for the Common Era, which is kind of equivalent to BC. So this is all before the Common Era and BC. So the Xia Dynasty was the first one that had recorded history of Chinese inhabitant around the area that I pointed at, this northern part, Henan, around here. They found oracle bones and you know, carvings on turtle shells and all that. That signifies the beginning of the Xia Dynasty. And then the Shang Dynasty comes next. Also a lot of carvings on bones and turtle shells. The Zhou Dynasty started a lot of cultural changes. This is, I'm not sure if any one of you is familiar with I Ching. Zhou is started by the family name Ji. The most famous two emperors who started Western and Eastern Zhou, they were very talented and, you know, sharp people. And to this day, we have people spending their whole life studying I Ching and still probably cannot get the gist of it. But that was written in this dynasty by one of these emperors. So the capitals near present day Xi'an, which is where the terracotta soldiers and the Qing Dynasty, the Qin Dynasty made the capital. And Luoyang would be a little further east, and these are the capitals of Zhou Dynasty. So if we refer back to the map, it would be, this is Xi'an, and right around there would be Luoyang. So you can see the dynasties are pretty cyclical. You know, they last a few hundred years. We go through a lot of changes during the dynasty itself. It would go from, you know, starting up the dynasty to a very, you know, stable period, and it's kind of like a bell curve. So during the Eastern Zhou Dynasty, which is when the dynasty really get into a lot of skirmishes, and really these are more tribal gatherings than a real empire. So at this time, it's not, these are all tribal leaders fighting amongst each other. So during the Zhou Dynasty, which is a few hundred years before Christ or before Common Era, is the spring and autumn period. That is when, excuse me, I mistakenly clicked. This is when Confucius and the other sages start their philosophies. Spring and autumn is called Chunqiu in Chinese. And Confucius taught a lot of students and traveled all around the little tribal countries and taught his philosophy all around. So he had a team of students following him. And then when the dynasty, you know, the main tribe for the Zhou Dynasty kind of lose power with weaker emperors. That's when all the warring states period starts, when all the little tribal leaders, they all fight for larger pieces of territory. And then the Qin Dynasty was where the Chang'an, or present day Xi'an, came into being during this time. Qin Dynasty was famous for the first emperor who united all of those tribes. He fought the 6 countries, and from Qin being the 7th one, he united all of them. And besides being a tyrant who built the Great Wall and killed a lot of people, his contribution to history was that he united the whole, back then, the Chinese territory. And by uniting, he unified the measurements and the width of the roads that makes the whole country then accessible to the different parts within the country. So then, of course, he also built the Great Wall, and a lot of people died building it to ward off the Mongols from the north. So this is the length and scale of the Great Wall, which can be seen, as you all know, from the moon. So let's move on to the Han Dynasty. Those are from the Qin Dynasty. Qin didn't last too long. The son of the first emperor only lasted a couple of years, and then the whole dynasty went downhill, or actually got overthrown by the Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty was started by somebody named Liu. Usually the name of the dynasty does not mean that it's the family or the guy who conquered it, his name. He actually, the dynasty characters are all given probably later in history. So the Han Dynasty was started by a family named Liu, and it also went through the bell curve from starting, all the settling all the turmoils from war, and then going into a more economic, stable time. So basically, all these dynasties go cyclical and all go down a bell curve. Western Han is not as strong. Eastern Han actually became stronger, but the whole dynasty is very strong in history, and it mattered a lot with the Chinese culture and history as a whole, because they expanded the territory of China through all the way to Xinjiang and Tibet. So, during the Qin Dynasty, it was more to in the middle of the map that we saw. The Han Dynasty was when we extended it. So, and also in Western Han, the capital moved to Chang'an from Xi'an. So Chang'an is closer to Beijing now, and later on they moved to Luoyang, which is also more towards the east than Xi'an. Xi'an was known as is the Western capital. I'm sorry, Chang'an actually is Xi'an. This is the same name. So for Western Han, they stayed at Xi'an, but Eastern Han, they moved to Luoyang. And then started a period of 6 dynasties, back to the warlords kind of, turmoil fighting period. But during the 6 dynasties, we actually had Buddhism introduced to China from India. The 3 kingdoms, very well known in, in the history of China, exist within this period. And the 3 kingdoms was a very, kind of really warring states like this period. 3 big powers were fighting for uniting the whole of China. Jin Dynasty is the one that overthrew this, the turmoil of the 3 kingdoms. Jin Dynasty is famous for creating a canal that, this is the canal that goes straight down and also facilitated the Grand Canal here, facilitated water communication, trading, shipping of grains from the south to the north, and the south is famous for textiles and rice. The people in the south eat more rice, and up in the north it's more wheat. So all of the transportation was facilitated by this big canal. The emperors didn't really do much in the Jin Dynasty, and that was the big achievement for Jin Dynasty, was building that canal and facilitating communication, economy, and traveling between the north and the south. Then comes the North and South dynasties. And Sui Dynasty ended that. So basically you see about 100 something, 200 years, cyclical dynasty, typically about that long. Then another important dynasty, the Tang Dynasty. The reason why I said it's important, just like Han, because we call ourselves, the Chinese call ourselves Tangren, which is people of Tang, and Hanren, people of Han. So, we're so proud of these two dynasties that we want to name ourselves the people from these dynasties. And you can see the capitals stay around Chang'an, which is Xi'an, and Luoyang. So those two, I took my sons on the tour that toured these old capitals. They are just filled with cultural edifices from the past. It's Luoyang and Chang'an. I think they had between them probably 13 times that they were capital of the whole country. So then from Tang, we went down to 5 dynasties. Now, Tang is also important for its wealth and its poems. A lot of poets and famous poets that we are still studying their work nowadays, the Chinese students. Tang and Song were the greatest poetic, had the greatest poetic achievement for China. Then Yuan Dynasty, it has the distinction of being the dynasty that was ruled by Mongol. So all these other dynasties, all the other people were Han people or Chinese people. And this is the first dynasty where the Mongols actually broke through the Great Wall and conquered China. Then, of course, the Ming Dynasty, the Mongols got chosen. They actually got assimilated. They didn't get chosen and became, Mongolians again, but a lot of them assimilated into the Chinese culture. And basically, Ming Dynasty overthrew just this Yuan Dynasty's emperors. But a lot of Mongols actually got assimilated into the Chinese tribes. So this reestablishment of rule there. And then Qing Dynasty would be the second dynasty that has Manchus, or people from outside the Great Wall, ruling China. And of course, they were destroyed or overthrown by the Republic period, by Dr. Sun Yat-sen led a team of liberals and Sun Yat-sen was educated in Honolulu and studying the principles that were, populated during this Republic period. It was actually our more American Constitution type of, from the people for the people, that kind of philosophy that created the Republic. Then, of course, the Republic went through a lot of wars with Japan's invasion, and then World War II, and we went through also, the rise of the Communist Party, and so a civil war actually lasted during all this time, and eventually, with 1949, the communists took over the mainland of China, and Chiang Kai-shek, who led the Nationalist Party, had moved, all of their soldiers and also a lot of artifacts from Beijing to Taiwan. So, and so it became the, the difference of a Republic of China back then and People's Republic of China would be the nationalists and the communists. And as we all know, total population of China makes up a quarter of the total world population. And so I talked about China and also the Mongols and the Manchus. How many ethnic groups are there in China? Can somebody give me a guess? Somebody can unmute yourself. Anybody want to guess? Okay, I know you guys know that I'm, yeah, go ahead.
56.
Okay, good for you. Was it Dr. I didn't know who it was, but anyway, yeah, that's a good answer. There are 56 ethnic groups, and among them, Han Chinese, which I am one of them, accounts for over 90%. So there are a lot of Han people, and quite a few, you know, the remaining percentages make up the other 55. So, and they are all scattered around the rims of the map that you were looking at. So, and the provinces of Yunnan, of course, Xinjiang, okay, these are the Bai nationality from Yunnan, and these are the Hui nationality in Xinjiang. You can see they are mostly Muslims. And then you have the Miao people in Guizhou, which is south, in the southern part of China. And let me move this box. And the Uyghur people are the ones in Xinjiang, more of a majority in Xinjiang, although they're still a minority. And a lot of people ask me, how many characters do you need, you know, to learn? Or if you're fluent in Chinese, how many characters do you think you know? For myself, I never counted the number of characters I know. We learned in Hong Kong, we learned English and Chinese together at my school. It's an Anglo-Chinese school, but other kids went to purely just Chinese school. So their English, they learn English probably at secondary or what we call high school level. But I did find a very interesting 400 character prose written by a University of Zhengzhou professor, this Mr. Guo. He never repeated the characters. I'm sure you guys know the Chinese character is known as a 方块字, which is a square-shaped character. So it's monosyllabic, and so we don't have any alphabets, or each square letter or character is almost like a pictogram. So they are not all pictures of things, though. We have 6 ways of creating Chinese characters. And in this prose, this rhyming prose that Professor Guo created, he has 1,000 phrases with 4 characters in each phrase, and each character never repeating itself. And he says at that level, it's a 6th grade student's vocabulary. So for me, I hope I'm more, have a bigger vocabulary than 6th grade. So I think I'm around 5,000 to 6,000 because of all the characters that I've learned since I moved here to the United States, because I kept learning. So even though the square characters are known, the Chinese characters are known as square characters, we have different calligraphy styles. This is the seal script, which is almost the earliest during the Han Dynasty. This script and this script, the clerical script, were invented or widely used. So remember, Han Dynasty was quite up, high up in my list of dynasties. So it was quite a while ago. And all these characters, this is the cursive script, which I'd like to learn, to do better, and running script. and a regular script. The regular script is what I learned calligraphy first. So basically a lot of nowadays, children nowadays also learn this as a fundamental script. And these characters all stand for one meaning. And it's anybody want to guess? Some of you know Chinese? This is the character that stands for water.
Water.
Shui, yes. So you can see then it starts with a picture of water. This is a waterfall. And the clerical script is known for its, you know, for the clerics, the secretaries, you know, and the bookkeepers. They use it most to write, to do a lot of writing. So they are all very square as well, you know, conforming to the square. And of course, the cursive is more artsy, and the running also more artsy, and the regular, all right, is what children learn first. Tang Dynasty, remember, was the first dynasty on my list. And also, actually, I think I mistakenly put it here. It should be Zhou Dynasty was when I Ching was written. All these characters are also one character only, and all these different styles. So these were all oracle bone type of carvings onto bones or turtle shells. And these are the bronze style that were, Shang Dynasty was also known for its bronze artifacts that a lot of Chinese archaeologists are still digging up. And these are the characters or carvings they would do onto bronze vessels. And the seal style here for Jin Dynasty and Han Dynasty, Qin and Han, they use these two styles. And the clerical script you can see are more clear in each stroke. So, you know, people can read the secretary or the bookkeeper's writing better. And then of course, the more stylish ones. And the grass script is the most crazy one. It's, you just cannot guess even. This is the best, I think in the middle here, oops, is the best style for reading this character, which stands for dragon. And here is a running script sample of a prose written by a very young person who's well known at his time. Okay, now going to explaining the traditional and simplified form of Chinese characters. Okay, this character here stands for dust, and you see the traditional styles have a lot of brush strokes or, you know, pencil strokes. And in 1949 and in two subsequent times, the mainland Chinese, the Communist Party, actually instigated simplified forms to educate their, you know, their people who advocated for them, the workers and the farmers. They are mostly illiterate during the previous dynasties because they're the hardest working, the poorer levels of the whole population. So a lot of them were illiterate, and you know, the Communist Party thinks, okay, we need to up the literacy of the country to make it strong. So they designed these simplified forms, and you can tell, you know, it's a lot easier than for the farmers and the workers to study or learn. This, if I break it up, means small earth, and that's dust. So it's very literate here. I mean, very, you know, very understandable. And for belong, or actually, if you were born in the year of the tiger, let's say this year is the year of the tiger, you belong tiger in Chinese. So 你属虎, meaning you belong in the year of the tiger. So this is 属 means, you know, also, you know, as property, or also you relate it to something. And they just simplified the strokes. and this is for technique, and this is for art. Now, as to the differences between Mandarin and Cantonese, which are the two most prevalent dialects used in China and among Chinese people, because a lot of Chinese emigrated outside, to make a living. You can, if you remember the maple leaf with the eastern coast being, a long coastal line there, a lot of population emigrate to the southeastern part of Asia, to Japan, to Korea, other parts of the world. The Chinese keep their own language. So whether they learned Mandarin or Cantonese depends on where they live. Basically, Mandarin is more prevalent in the northern part of the country. Of course, then after the Communist Party united the continent, kind of at that part of China, the mainland part of China, they made Putonghua the most prominent dialect that everybody should learn. And Cantonese was mostly spoken in the southern provinces. And the province named Guangzhou was named Canton by the Brits when they were dealing with the Jin Dynasty. And that's why we have Cantonese. So it's really Guangdonghua, the dialect from the province Guangdong. So the differences, I'm lucky because I was born to a pair of Northerners, Chinese, emigrated to Hong Kong from the north. So my first tongue was the Mandarin dialect. And then in school, and then I made friends. I learned Cantonese as second dialect. This is the character for cattle. It evolved from a picture of a cattle with a horn and and a nose down here. But so now it's in Mandarin is niu, but in Cantonese it's ngao. Cantonese sounds a little bit more blunt to me, and Mandarin, if I can generalize like that, Mandarin is more sing-song, more melodic. And of course, you guys know about the tones that make it so difficult for Westerners or English-speaking people to learn Chinese, because Mandarin has 4 tones, and later we'll talk about that. And Cantonese, however, has 9 tones. So it's even harder to learn Cantonese. For people who were born in the north and speaking Mandarin predominantly, they moved to Hong Kong. When I was in Hong Kong, there were a lot of immigrants from the north, running away from the communists and all that, and they settled in Hong Kong. And there were a lot of fights started by just misunderstanding northern people speaking Cantonese. And so we got niu, ngao, okay, 2 different very different sounds. And then you have button or turn, for a verb. In Mandarin is niu, and in Cantonese is nao. All right, so you can tell the difference. So here are the 4 tones we were talking. Everybody talks about this when they learn Chinese. Mom is ma, horse is ma, and for a question you ask ma, ni hao ma, okay, ma. And for scolding, this is the 4th tone, ma. So you have ma, 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 ma. So the 4 tones are like that. This is tone number 1, 2, 3. The 3rd tone usually is more of a like the V is sounding. So it's more a ma, like that. So when you ask a question, you how ma, even though it is it sounds more like this, a raised sound of ma. It is actually the 3rd tone. When I'm teaching adult class in the North County Chinese School now, believe you me, I have to deal with this all the time. My student is from Venezuela, and he's fluent in Spanish and Portuguese, of course, English as well. And I'm having a fun time telling him about the 4 tones. And here's another other characters. For health is jian, and for sword is also jian, and for scissors, or the verb of cutting, is jian. So this is the 3rd tone here for jian. But jian and jian sound pretty much alike, except they're very different. So I'm sure you can gather now, a lot of Chinese learning has to do with context. So when you're talking about health, like if you're talking about, your parents' health, you would not mistaken it as a sword, as the character for sword. So Chinese is very context dependent. So other ways to learn Chinese. Zhuyin is the way that people in Taiwan learned it. They use bopomorpha. These are like Japanese characters. And this is how the little kids learn fang shu jia lo. So this is, they combine the sounds of these characters. And then you have the tones. Okay, this is the 4th tone. This is the 3rd. This is the 4th again. And this is a short one with a dot. So fang, okay, fang is 4th. Shu jia lo. Lo, this is a quick one. So for the dots, it's a very short sound. And for Hanyu pinyin, which is what the mainland Chinese is using, it's basically more, pinyin is more using the English characters or alphabets. So this is the simplified Chinese Hanyu pinyin, and the traditional is Hanyu pinyin, like that. So you can tell some of the simpler characters were not simplified. They remained the same. And this is mainly used in mainland China. Okay, pinyin, this is how they would phonetically write out Hanyu pinyin. This is Hanyu pinyin. Okay, and I won't go into the more difficult ones like the X and the Q ones, which I have to get my Chinese school student to really understand. But this is, you get a gist of how Hanyu pinyin is learned in mainland Chinese now with simplified. Okay, this is the most complicated character that I have seen. The traditional one and the simplified one really didn't simplify it that much. And guess what it stands for? It's actually the name of a noodle. More prevalent in the northwestern part of China. Very thick noodles, very wide noodles. And since we're in San Diego, whoops, I think we're, okay, I don't know why my light's off. Hang on. Can you guys see me at all? Well, as long as you can see the screen, I will still go on. Okay.
We can see you.
San Diego group, the Mensa group, I included these Chinese impact in San Diego. This is, these are the places where you can find stuff about Chinese. The Chinese History Museum down on 3rd Street. It was started by actually a friend of mine. He's since passed, but they have actually expanded from the 3rd Street. This house was actually moved from Chinatown up 3rd Street a little bit, or 3rd Avenue, and to this spot. And he has, this historical museum has expanded to the 4th Street as well, with Confucius statue in front of it. So pay it a visit. If I can see my keyboard. And this is the House of China, where I sometimes volunteer to write the calligraphy for people. And they always have a Chinese New Year celebration down here with the dragon dance. This is a temple. Even though they are a Buddhist temple, their emphasis is in the culture. So if you go to visit the temple's bookstore, you can actually find a lot of cultural artifacts or books and calligraphy and paintings and stuff, and that's why I included it. I'm not a Buddhist. And it's on Park Boulevard, really close to Balboa Park. And then, of course, I have to talk about the Chinese schools. This is, I was told, the earliest Chinese school, and it's on the cross street on Claremont, and I believe Ruffin. I'm not so sure, but it's in that vicinity. And they teach classes in both Mandarin and Cantonese, and so I know a lot of teachers there. I did not teach there, but because I live in North County, I started teaching in the North County Chinese school. And even though the adult class has not taken place for a long time, I taught there 10 years ago. Their adult class, I had about, I say 10 people in my advanced class. And there was a fundamental class that my friend taught. So it was, back then there were quite a few students, but nowadays, first of all, because COVID, it has turned to Zoom. And this last week was the first week they went back to in-person classes. But my adult class is still on Zoom. Okay, these are some of the interesting Chinese related links that I want to share with people. I adore this, Mr. Pei, I.M. Pei. I believe he designed the Golden Gate Bridge. Don't, quote me there, but I think he did. But of course, he's most famous for the inverted, pyramid outside of the Louvre in Paris. And I was associated with a Preservation of Historical Truth society, which has is no longer in existence. So I know Iris Chang very intimately, and her parents. And she wrote about the Forgotten Holocaust, which is the massacre of Nanjing. I don't know if a lot of people know about this, but I hope you all do. And these are some links to traditional musical instruments. Even though I say traditional, the Han people adopted a lot of Mongolian and Uyghur musical instruments. So these are nice segments that will tell you about the music that's created from these instruments. And another one is the Butterfly Lovers, which is a Chinese symphony written by a Chinese, and it's based on kind of like the Romeo and Juliet, story or legend from the Tang Dynasty, and it was a very sad story, and the both the lovers died, and they turned into butterflies. So that is the gist of my talk, and because I'm in dark, I can't see what time it is. Anyway, I'd like to open up to the floor for Q&A. Hang on.
If you want to take a moment and just turn on the light, that would be fine.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I'll... All right. I don't know what happened. I'm back. I saw two chats. Let me see what they are. From Tim. Oh, you read Taipan. I don't remember it being. Oh. Really? You guys didn't study British history and they didn't talk about Opium Wars? I wonder why. And Bob, it was one of English. Okay, and I don't think that they were proud of it. Yep, you got it. And
folks, you can unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask questions.
I had a question, Mary.
Sure.
I had probably not without any basis suspected that the name China was given to that country by the Western world after the Qin people. Is that a reasonable conclusion?
I think it came from Sina, S-I-N-A. I'm not sure, how it became C-H-I-N-A, and I did not read about it as as being after the Jin Dynasty, because Sina, S-I-N-A, China is a very it's a little bit derogatory to Chinese, so we like to use the Chinese name of China, 中国, as the central kingdom. That is how we refer to China. So because they always thought they're the center of the universe, because the emperors never traveled out of the mainland, and neither did Mr. Mao Zedong. But of course, we know we're not the center of the universe, but we're still just kind of used to the central, the 中国 part, the middle kingdom. So yeah, I can research about it, Bob. Good question, though.
I think you said, this is Tim, I think you said you didn't want to talk much about politics, but if you did, could you give us a clue as to why China seemed to want to support North Korea?
What North Korea? I didn't quite get it.
What I was getting at was, it seems to me that China is supporting North Korea, one of the countries that is, and if you did want to talk about that.
From what I know, it's because they're both communists.
So I think it started that way, but now they are in kind of a devil's bargain, because I believe that China is very much afraid that the government will collapse in North Korea, and they will be left with millions of refugees with no productivity and a lot of human need.
True. And I don't know if anybody remembers, during the Korean War, China actually helped out Korea and fought against the Americans. And
sure.
at the end of the in the Republic era of China, when it was ruled by the warlords, when after Dr. Sun Yat-sen united the country and overthrew the Tang Dynasty, we were actually friends because of the Flying Tigers. So even though they were hired to help, they were paid, but we actually, really were grateful for the Americans who came over to help and build the Nationalist Party's Air Force, because, China never had Air Force. So we were friends until the Korean War. Yes, Richard, you had your hands raised. You have a question? Oh, okay. So yeah, that's the part of the little bit of history that I know. It's interesting that in Hong Kong, we had to study the Chinese history and British, because of the Anglo-Chinese school I went to. I had to study the colonial, British history, as well as Chinese history with all the dynasties. And we were not taught to pronounce the Chinese characters using the pinyin that I described earlier. We had to remember each character from memory. Just remember it. Okay, that's the pronunciation, and we learned and remembered it that way. And the curriculum of Chinese history ended in 1911 when Dr. Sun Yat-sen overthrew Qing Dynasty, and then I went to school, in the 60s, 70s, and they did not dare talk about the communists and, the fightings between the communists and the nationalists. Not even Chiang Kai-shek. We didn't get any history, history lessons about Taiwan, how, just basically everything stopped at 1911. I had to read up on magazines and, basically newspapers and gather from pieces everywhere to do my own little research to know about that part of history. And because of the sensitive situation that Hong Kong was in, because it was a British colony, but 98% of the people, of the population, were Chinese, and still, I think still are about 98% or so.
I have a question. What is the perspective of the 55 minorities from within China? How are they viewed? Actually,
very good question. I really like the to learn about the minorities, and they are just so interesting. They are viewed as with interest because of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang and the Tibetans in Tibet. The Han and the communist Chinese did not get well received in these two provinces. So, you guys all know, the Uyghurs had rebellions, and the Tibetans has, they have their loyalty more to the monks than to the communist government. But that has changed a lot, and the change came from the government really did help, even though the government, meaning more the Han people, because they're still the minority, but they really took better care of the livelihood of the people. Tibet and Xinjiang used to be so poor, but even though they were rich, in resources, excuse me, especially Xinjiang, Tibet is kind of poor because it's a high plateau that, near the Himalayan, really, the altitude and everybody being so religious. I'm using very general terms. So, of course, individually, we can have very smart Tibetan or very rich Tibetans, especially the monks, the monks in the monastery. They were like royalty, but the basic, common people were so poor, and the government did help with the Communist Party. They did help modernize and actually build a lot of freeways, highways to join these two remote provinces to the other parts of China. And as a Chinese American looking from the US side point of view and watching a lot of entertainment from China, I can see in the links on those pages, anyone who's interested can go and search on YouTube. The Mongolians, the Xinjiang people, they made up a lot of new interest in entertainment. So we have a lot of cultural exchange on the entertainment industry. Singers, actresses, actors, they really are welcome in the main Han platform for entertainment in let's say plays, stage plays, movies, TV shows. A lot of them have become very prominent. So this is from like a commoner point of view, not any political or economic, social point of view. And with the country being a lot richer than before, with the growth of New China, people tours around a lot more. So I see a lot of young people making treks to Tibet by bike, or that kind of thing is common. It's not like it's not taboo anymore. And because of the highways and the roads, communication, transportation advances. high-speed trains. You know, it's just amazing. So I'm optimistic for the minorities, but because of I think you saw the geological map that I showed earlier, a lot of mountainous places are very inaccessible. So there's still a lot of poverty. Yes, Dr. Myers, Deborah.
Can you make any comments about the status of elderly persons in China currently, now that families are no longer large and there's no social security?
I have a good video that shows very positive current, status of elderly. I don't know if you guys know, retiring age for women is 50, and for men is 55 or 60, mostly 60 in China. So they're still pretty young when they're at retirement age. And basically nobody works beyond retirement in government, like in public jobs. So what they do is a lot of parks have built health equipment for these people. And I have a video from and I think she's American, living in Beijing and speaking quite fluently Putonghua, or Mandarin, and visiting these older folks around the Heavenly Temple, which is, near the center part of Beijing. There are health parks with very nice health equipment, and these people were doing pretty much, gymnastic stunts, and they are elderly people, the retirees. So this young lady, I think she says she's like 27 or something, try to do the same stunts on the equipment, and she can hardly do them. So I know I kind of veered away from your question, but traditionally Chinese culture nurtures the old. We have this reverence for the older folks. So every year around springtime, we have the ancestor worshiping festival, where we would go and visit people who passed, kind of like the Dia de la Muerte for the Mexicans. But we don't dance around or sing song. We basically pay tribute to the tombstones of our, past either parents or grandparents. And so, elderly folks are still respected. And a lot of elderly folks don't look so elderly as before. So because of the health equipment, the importance of health that they know, and the advance in medicine, really, of both Chinese and Western medicine, at least around the capital. I know for a fact that in my own family, I have a cousin who had a glioma, a brain tumor, that was at a very tricky spot, and he was 30 something when they discovered it. And he went to Beijing and had gamma ray operation done to him. He lived another 15 years and, died young, but at least, the gamma ray operation did not. That was quite a while ago. I'd say about 15, 18 years ago when he had the gamma ray operation. And then, of course, Chinese medicine also flourished with the acupuncture and all the other herbal treatments and all that. So both traditional and Western medicine has been flourishing also in China. And of course, the country is getting richer, and so, more money can be dedicated to research and all that. So everything is looking up and up. And going back to your question, Deborah, yeah, older people are always respected. But then, of course, you have individual families where there are less younger folks to support, the older folks who are living longer, because because of medicine, advance in medicine. So I think we're kind of dealing with that on a global term, basically.
Right.
Thanks for the question. I see Vincent and Edward, you both have a Chinese last name, so I'd like to hear what you think about my presentation. Sorry to pick you guys out.
Yeah, they're both muted.
Yes, of course. Yes, I'm Chinese. My father was from China, but didn't talk about it much, so it's not something I know much about.
So I'm glad you come then.
Yeah.
What about you, Vincent?
Yeah, actually, I'm a third generation born in Jamaica. So I've only been to China once during Hurricane Irma, and I just like to learn more about it.
Oh, okay, great. I hope I satisfied at least a little bit of that curiosity.
Can I ask a couple of things?
Yes, Tim.
There's and I've forgotten, sorry, I forgot the group's name, but they were banned in China, but I believe they're responsible for a newspaper called the Epoch Times or the Epoch Times.
Falun Gong. Falun Gong is the
yeah, I hadn't heard much about those guys since that.
They are active. I've seen Falun Gong practiced at La Jolla Shores when Leslie and I were walking around there. So they are still around, but they lost the popularity, at least in mainland China, and a lot of very learned people like scholars and PhDs from China who left the mainland, joined the Epoch Times, the groups. So they don't use the Taoist religion anymore. And even though Falun Gong, the name itself, the group itself, has kind of faded out of view, if you had seen the Shen Yun, that dancing show that goes around every year.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Those guys.
Yeah, they're those guys. The reason I know is because I attended a performance and I thought, oh, these are the stories, populated by the Taoist people. And that's how I come to, defer that, okay, this group must be related to them. And there are a lot of really great dancers and, actresses who left the country and joined, of course, it's a really great way to make a living, dancing with the Shen Yun or acting with the Shen Yun group. And they are worldwide now, I believe. They're very popular. But yeah, I agree that Falun Gong itself as a cult, according to the mainland Chinese, or a religious group, according to, anybody else, they have kind of faded from view.
Okay. The other thing I was going to ask you is, it was on NPR the other day with Terry Gross, where some guy was commenting on Hollywood and how the Chinese are essentially, to some extent, controlling the films that are made in Hollywood, because they're very sensitive about certain things. The date of Tiananmen Square, for example, is is going to get you locked up.
June 4th. Well, I pay attention because my major in college was broadcasting and TV and film. And so I pay attention to the credits at the end of movies and, everything else. And I can see a lot of, in Hollywood movies, a lot of Chinese money has been, in there. And of course, anything that Jackie Chan is in has a lot of Chinese investment. So yeah, I agree. We are getting, kind of, what do you call it? I wouldn't use invaded because that's very negative, but, a lot of assimilated Chinese money in our real estate, as well as entertainment, a lot of areas. We're becoming more global. That's a more positive, way of looking at it. the pervasiveness of real estate ownership is very common, because I mean, to me, because I have relatives who are in the marble construction business, and for a home remodeling to include marble and everything paid in cash, that is very common among the Chinese homeowners. And we always kind of, what is it? Deborah wrote something, but anyway, from just my personal circle, from the people I know, I can tell, like folks who are in their 30s buying $1 million. I know $1 million home nowadays is very common, but a decade, 15 years ago, they were starting to pay cash, to buy now probably $2 million homes, and they pay for it. I mean, they don't have to go get a mortgage. And so where did this money come from? There are not that many super rich people that are outside of China, we thought, until we found out, that they're buying up real estate. So it's very interesting. And we actually have friends who, when my husband and my oldest son, I wasn't on that trip, they went and visited Shandong, which is on, our parents' native province, and it has become. It used to be German. What do you call it? Occupied territory, and that's how.
That's where the beer comes from.
The Tsingtao beer. Yeah. So that part has become very rich in real estate, and people buying villas with ocean view and all that. And they were, my husband and my oldest son were singled out from a kind of like a relatives type of thing. They wanted to make friends with people from America, and basically because they have cash, they have money to burn, and so they want. This guy only had one son, and he wanted his son to learn English in San Diego. He came and basically did not go through the English qualification exams. Basically, kind of stayed here for a couple of years, spending money and buying cheap, quote unquote cheap BMWs, because in China they had to pay $100% tax. So everything is cheap when they buy it here. A secondhand James Bond type, BMW in China would be a, kind of very unaffordable vehicle, but here they could buy it secondhand, in good shape. So they're very happy here. Eventually the boy went home. He learned a little bit of English and went home and handled his dad's real estate empire. So we see people like that, and it's amazing how there's still a lot of, what do you call it? A wide gap of the rich, the super rich, and the common folks. Because you see people talking about the Foxconn factory that made iPhones in the southern provinces, and how people from the north and western areas, more poorer villages, would have to spend their whole year working at Foxconn and leaving their older generation and their kids at home. So basically these poorer villages or mountain villages are just comprised of really old folks and little children who never get to see their parents. So it's a lot of social problem that I can see, just from people I know. And but then you have these rich folks who, even though they don't speak the word of English, like this friend that we befriended, or my husband befriended in China, he was daring enough to take his customers or clients to Maldives, and basically could not communicate, even with hand signals. So they had to grab some Chinese who were also vacationing there, but this guy was so bold that they have money to burn, like I said. So they wanted to please their clients, and so they went to Maldives and give them a vacation. So you see a very wide gap between the rich and the poor, and which we also see here in the States.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I look at it from a somewhat different perspective. I visited China 41 years ago when they were just barely emerging from the Cultural Revolution. And at that time, they had made a remarkable leap. I mean, China has always, I mean, I'm talking about millennia, they've had this huge gap between rich and poor. But they had just made a climb from the poor actually being in starvation conditions to a situation where in 1981, when I was there was enough to eat that they weren't having a lot of starvation. But it was still, there were huge discrepancies between the very few people who were high in the party rank and the rest of the country. I mean, nobody had private automobiles. The only automobiles belonged to government officials, and I believe probably were considered the property of the government. Everybody was traveling by foot or on bicycle at that time. Whereas now there is at least something of a middle class, even though there is great disparity between the rich and the poor. They've made huge strides in industrialization of the
I
country.
agree. Yes.
I was there on a trade mission, and we were working with the Machinery Import-Export Agency, Mashimpex, and their building was the largest building, the tallest building in Beijing. It's 5 stories high. And it closed at 5 o'clock. We needed to bring some equipment in, and they were very angry at us because they had to
work late.
The people who were sweeping had to stay till 5 o'clock. All the people who really worked there had left at 4. So the whole attitude in the country has changed over the last 40 years, and they are much more industrialized, westernized, and more middle class than they were as recently as 1.5 generations ago.
Okay, Bob, since 1981, when was the last time you went again?
Well, we went through about, what, 5 or 6 years ago. We were on our way to Thailand. And we landed, I don't remember which of the cities we landed in, but we were only in the airport. But the airport was certainly modern as compared to when I was there in 81. We were taking off on the Chinese airline in Russian Trident jets, which were like the 727s, you know, the 3 engines in the tail. And we had to wait on the taxiway until somebody cleared the herd of sheep off the taxiway. It was a different country back then.
Yep. My first trip to China was 1983 on a business trip. And that's the first time I got to see my uncle, my father's brother, and my aunt, my father's sister. For all those years, I was, I believe, 28 at the time. I have not seen them, not even, just from their really young pictures. So for the first time, I was there, 1983, in Beijing first, and then I went to Shanghai to see my aunt. In Beijing, I lived at the Beijing Hotel, and we had soldiers in front of the lobby and the flower stand, or in the parking lot, with common people looking through from that distance, and not being able to get in to the hotel.
They had friendship stores that only foreigners were allowed to use.
Yep, I remember those. Yeah. And we had to use a different kind of currency too. Remember that?
That's right. There was the yuan and there was the renminbi. The renminbi, if I recall correctly, was the domestic currency. And the yuan was for foreign exchange.
So we've come a long way from, we're using the same renminbi now in China. And from my first trip, 1983, to my last trip was 2015. And I've visited Beijing 3 times, in between. And the thing is, Beijing has grown in leaps and bounds, and you see high risers, that basically, remember the ring roads?
Yes.
When I visited Beijing television station in 1983, there were 3 ring roads. And now if you can get close to the 6th ring road, you'll be fortunate. It's just a huge traffic jam all the way.
I'm sure I wouldn't recognize anything.
You wouldn't.
Except the Forbidden City and Tiananmen Square and perhaps the Temple of Heavenly Peace.
Yeah, that's the main part. And that is within the 1st ring road. That's the main part. And the video I was talking about was, remember, Temple of Heavenly Worship, Tiantan. Tiantan, the park next to it was where the elderly folks were all doing, gymnastic stunts. So anyway, back to, I agree with you, Bob. And I'm not saying there's only rich, super rich, and poor, but there is a big gap and also a big middle class in between, which is what I attribute to the Communist Party's recent years' growth. When I was in there in Beijing in 1983, everybody's was, I walked through the hutongs because at that time they were still not open to the tourists. And the people sitting in the hutongs were talking among themselves and looking at me because I had business attire on, and my glasses were, from the Western world. And they were saying, where's these people coming from? Because I was walking with my husband, and they thought that we were Japanese. They didn't think that we understood them. So, and now if we go back to probably the same hutong, if it's still there, those folks would probably look down upon us. Where did these baggers come from? Wearing jeans and sneakers and stuff. They would all be in their, whatever designer shoes. So it's a whole, turnover of economy, basically. With the bullet train, it's still expensive, but you can speedily go from China or Guangdong, southern China to northern China. And it facilitates business, it facilitates money moving around, and all of the real estate and merchants, so it's just not fathomable to my mind. I want to wait for, hopefully COVID would be over, or at least it's, within living limits that we can still travel back to China. I'm missing the growth there, but we're never too far away because WhatsApp and WeChat, get us all connected with our friends and relatives in China, even though now it gets a little, tricky using the language. We've learned to kind of, stay away from sensitive topics because they may get, they may not get through the Great Firewall of China.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, I see people leaving, so I think maybe, I don't know, any more questions? It's been, oh boy, an hour and a half.
About Feng Shui.
Okay. Is this Tim?
Excuse me? It's Tim, yeah.
Yes. What about Feng Shui?
Do you have anything to say about it? Because I've heard 2 different stories. I used to do business with Taiwanese people, and one guy was pretty cynical. He said, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll give you a certificate that says I'm a Feng Shui doctor for $100."
A lot of those in Hong Kong as well. Yeah, I was very skeptical when I was younger, and I'm still skeptical because it's so hard to get to the real, masters. And Feng Shui actually originate with I Ching. I don't know if you saw on my dynasty list, I talked about I Ching being written by the Emperor of Zhou Dynasty, which is way up there, like 2,000 years ago. I Ching introduced the hexagrams and the yarrow sticks, which determines Feng Shui, yin yang, qigong, which is kind of like our martial arts. It's so pervasive into the culture. I had a page written for I Ching, but I know it will open a can of worms and we'd be here till 11 because, and plus I don't really know much about it. It takes people a whole life to study it, like I said earlier. So I really would love to know more about I Ching. I only know too little to be dangerous.
Right.
To be very dangerous. So feng shui is I once saw a picture of the compass that they use. I've never employed one of those masters, but I have heard a lot of like gossips or friends talks about feng shui, and it has to do with the harmony of qi in either a commercial building or a residential building. So the compass that they use actually has those hexagrams that were created or first documented in I Ching. So yeah, I'm still at the skeptical side because you really cannot get to the real masters of feng shui. But in Hong Kong as well as in Taiwan, a lot of folks totally believe it. And besides the commercial and residential, which is the young, the living, human part of feng shui, there's also the dead part, the funeral part, where you bury your ancestors according to a certain feng shui. You have to find the right spots with the right qi, and then you would bring harmony and or prosperity to your offsprings for the posterity. So there's I'm like you, Tim. I don't know much about it, but I can see when I go into a place that's kind of jumbo jangle, kind of very offensive. If you go in and you don't feel right, that is that I get the feeling of that because of my background with just studying about the culture and things that I learn and all that. So I can sense the flow and ebb and flow of the qi, but I'm no expert and I don't know any experts. I wish I do. I wish I did.
In the West, we employ interior designers and architects to make a building flow properly. We use terms differently, but there are reasons, human reasons, to lay spaces out in certain ways and why other ways might be disadvantageous and uncomfortable. We think about things differently, but I think there are probably some basic human needs and emotions and reactions that are cross-cultural.
I agree. But I also I have been to like designer homes and stuff, and basically very well adorned houses, and it didn't give me any harmony feelings. So feng shui exists in Hong Kong and Taiwan, where a lot of commercial buildings and people value it because basically for the wealth. These two places have a lot of money at stake. Whether you live there or you work there, and that's when they really look to, on top of the interior design, the feng shui masters. And there are some very well-known ones people swear by. And I don't know if you guys know about the top rich person, Li Ka-shing in Hong Kong, and there are other real estate moguls. There was one who passed on, and then his wife actually believed in psychics and also the feng shui master. It became like the gossip of the town. And they have these folks have the money to employ the masters, and the masters call the shots of what they do and where they build and how they build it. And before they consult the architects and the interior designers, they consult the masters first. So yeah, I agree with you, Bob. But these people with billions, you know, in the stake, they would go to the feng shui masters. They won't want to dare risk their wealth. So
years ago, there was a show on Discovery about Chinese films. And apparently there's a series, I've seen one or two of Chinese ghost stories, which I thought were wonderful because the evil spirit has a tongue that can knock trees down.
Oh.
It's like Hollywood, but it was very Chinese. And also apparently vampires hop. Have you heard of that?
When vampires what?
They hop.
Oh. Yeah, actually not vampires, but they're the dead bodies. I have read stories about people who can drive these hopping dead bodies. They don't suck blood, they just hop. And instead of using trucks and, you know, coffins to transport them, you just have this piper of corpses, and, you know, he can lead these corpses hopping to the places they want to transport them. So, you know, truth or not, don't know.
A director called Choi Hark, who I believe is from Hong Kong, but he went to film school in the United States. It was very interesting.
Oh, Choi Hark, yes.
Yeah.
I have friends who know him because we're about the same age. Choi Hark, I think, is maybe a few years older than I am. But yeah, I worked at the Hong Kong TVB television station before I came. And for the 2 years I was there, I knew a lot of folks who became directors and producers, and, you know, so I have quite a bit of friends. And a good friend of mine I'm still in touch with, who used to be a writer, used to date Choi Hark in their younger times.
And then there was Run Run Shaw. I think it was the money behind Blade Runner.
Yeah, he died in his hundreds. I think he was 104.
Wow.
And that family is from Shanghai originally, and yeah, flourished in Hong Kong. Shall we close up? Sure. Thank you very much for all the interesting questions and for joining, you know, my talk. I appreciate it, and come to know quite a few Mensa friends. So
thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. This was just wonderful.
Thank you.
Perhaps we can talk you into coming back for another session at some point in the future.